Plug-in solar promises to do something incredible. You just buy a couple of solar panels, plug them into a socket, start saving money. Sounds simple, right? But after surveying this property, I found a big problem that almost nobody is talking about. And if you miss it, your plug-in solar system could perform badly, cost you money, or even become a safety risk for your home. So in this video, we're revealing the big problem with plug-in solar and how you can get around it. So first, let's start at the consumer unit. So this is what we call a consumer unit or fuse box. It's where all of the wiring for your house circuits comes back to, and then where your house is connected to the grid. So this main switch turns everything off, and each of these circuit breakers does a different circuit. What I need to check here is that these circuit breakers are what we call bi-directional. In other words, they'll still work safely if power's flowing back through them. Because originally when this house was built, these circuits were not designed to have plug-in solar connected to them. So I'm going to take a picture of these particular circuit breakers nice and close up so I can see the part number. And then I'm going to do a little Google search or AI search to try and find out if these are bi-directional or not. Based on the model shown, yes, these RCBOs are bi-directional. That's a win. But there's one caveat. We need to make sure that these RCBOs are type A RCBOs. And interestingly, they don't tell you on the RCBO specifically what type it is. You have to know what the symbols mean. So if we zoom in on this symbol here, the little wavy line on top of a little humpy bit inside a little box, that means it's a type A RCBO, which is necessary for plug-in solar systems. So we've ticked that off our list. So one of the biggest challenges, but potentially the biggest benefits, is installing plug-in solar in a flat or apartment. And a couple of my friends have asked me to come around and check out their place to see if it might be suitable for plug-in solar. So we're going to take you with us and see what we can find out. So we're here on this beautifully sunny balcony. And I'm thinking ideal location for solar panels, right? Stick a couple of solar panels on the outside of this balcony against these railings. You've got a nice bit of afternoon sun on here, but there's a few problems here. So we've got a width of the balcony of 2.8 meters, and the height of just the railings is about 1.1 meters. And that's where our first problem comes in, because there's no solar panel that's going to perfectly fit in this space. The big panels that we looked at earlier at my house are 2 meters tall by 1.13 wide. So actually width-wise, we could probably fit one panel here perfectly. But 2 meters long means there would be a bit of a gap either side. So we'd have a panel like that with a gap of about 1 foot either side. So actually, that could be perfect. But the second question is, how on earth do you safely attach a solar panel to some railings like this and ensure that it doesn't fall off on somebody's head? I've seen in Germany that they've got these special mounting brackets for balconies. I don't know if they'd be suitable for a British balcony or whether German balconies are special. Let me know in the comments if you know anything about that stuff. But I'm guessing that the ideal situation would be, rather than mounting it vertically like this, to have it cantilevered out slightly, ideally around a 35-degree pitch to get the most amount of generation from the solar panels. If you have them flat like that at a 90-degree angle, you're going to get less solar generation because you're going to get less irradiance on the panel. But then that poses another problem, which is if it's at an angle like that, it's going to stick out quite far from the property, and aesthetically, I'm not quite sure how that would look, and also whether it would upset some neighbours. So we might have to talk to the owner of the flat and see what he thinks. By the way, I've got a favour to ask you. If you enjoy our content and you haven't subscribed yet, it really helps us if you do, and it means you won't miss out on any future content. So hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well. That means you'll get notified every time we post a new video, which is usually every week on Tuesday evenings at 7 PM at the moment. So make sure you tune in for the next one. Now, another big question is, where are you going to plug the system into? Ideally, you want an outdoor socket, which we've got here, and it's perfect. However, some outdoor sockets are not safely wired, so you should definitely get the socket checked by a qualified and competent electrician to make sure that the wiring is safe to it. Because it might be that it's been weirdly wired, like off the lighting circuit or off some dodgy shed supply or something like that, and the cable supplying it might not be able to handle the power that the plug-in solar and battery system can send back. Or you might have the case where you don't have an outside socket at all, like this. There's no socket on the balcony, which means that a battery system would either have to be plugged in inside, or we'd have to install a socket on the balcony, which is going to be an interesting bit of work. So if we wanted to install an additional socket on the balcony, there's two options. There's this one here on this side of the balcony, and you know, the Artisan angle drilling company could quite easily drill through there and spur off and put an outside socket on. But that's right below the pizza oven and potentially not where the customer wants the battery system to be. So there might be a chance to do it over this side, but it could be a bit more complicated. So we do have a socket down here, which the TV and stuff is running off at the moment, but it's in this wall, which may or may not be plasterboard. It sounds a little bit like it's dot and dab or something like that. We'd need to get a cable from there, potentially down with some trunking or something along the skirting, and then drill through the wall to put an outside socket on there. It adds complexity to this whole thing, and it's something you need to think about if you're thinking about getting balcony solar. But you might wonder, well, do we really need to have the batteries on the balcony? Couldn't they be inside? Well, from a safety perspective, I think inside would be okay, but there's a problem. How do you get the DC cables from the solar panels from the balcony into the house? You've then potentially got to drill a hole through the wall to run those DC cables through and plug them into the battery on the inside, or you've got to constantly have the window open and have the cables slinging through there, which I would not recommend. So I do think having the batteries outside is probably going to be the better option. In this situation, we've got our solar panels on the fence here, and the cable run will have to run all the way along the fence and over to the battery. Now, I've just temporarily slung these into place, and as you can see, it looks hideous and it's not safe. So proper cable management is going to be important, whether that's having some kind of conduit or trunking to hide the cables, or at least clipping them neatly along the fence or wall or whatever it is. That's all going to take work and planning to do properly and safely. But the next thing is a little bit more tricky. Now, my house is quite new, so we've got what's called RCBOs, where each individual circuit breaker protects from earth leakage current as well as overcurrent. But most older houses don't have that. They might have a single main RCD or dual RCDs followed by MCBs or miniature circuit breakers. So are those safe to connect to? And if so, how do you know? So we can see the kitchen sockets are fed from this RCD. We're going to have to check whether it's a type A or type AC and whether it's capable of feeding power back through it. So these are actually type AC RCDs. If I snap a picture there and zoom in for you, you can see that is the squiggle that we talked about earlier. So these are AC RCDs, not capable of handling DC leakage current, and we would definitely need to change these to type A RCDs in order to fit a solar and battery system on this socket circuit. Other than that, generally normal RCDs are capable of handling bidirectional power. So it looks like the circuits are modern enough that it should be safe to connect, other than potentially upgrading this RCD. Now, when it comes to panel location, orientation and shading, I've just jerry-rigged a couple of panels in my garden to show you and illustrate some of the things to think about. For example, panel location, if you've got a fence like this, could be a suitable place to mount some solar panels if it's in a sunny area. Now this, I've actually tilted them slightly because the closer to a 35-degree pitch you are, the better the generation's going to be. But that means you're probably going to need some kind of special solar fence mounting equipment in order to hold it at an angle securely, and that's all something that you need to factor in. So this is Graham. You might remember him if you're a long-time viewer of the channel. Let me know in the comments where you remember him from. Graham, thanks for having us back.
You're welcome. Nice to have you.
So tell me about your thoughts with this whole thing, because I know you're a bit on the fence because, you know, you've got lots of questions, understandably, which is why you've asked us to come here. What are some of the things that you're worried about or that you think might be a challenge?
Well, I'd love to have renewables, but living in a shared ownership flat, I think, is probably the first hurdle. The landlord, if you like, they're pretty harsh on what you can and can't do. It is a nice idea. I know we wouldn't get a lot of generation, but the thing for me, I'm really worried about spoiling the aesthetic. So the green is really important for us. We love looking out, seeing some green on the balcony. To take it up with big panels, we think might be a problem. heat is a bizarre one. Today's really hot. What is it? About 33 degrees while we're talking. So for me, if that's out there, a black panel is going to be attracting an awful lot of heat. So is that going to then just stifle this house because we're blocking a little bit of the sun, but we're also generating a lot of heat with a black panel?
Yeah.
Is that going to make my flat even hotter than it is currently?
So the first point that you mentioned was about the whole shared ownership thing. You either go down the it's better to seek forgiveness than permission route, which a lot of people probably would, or you go down the route of, okay, I'm going to ask them, and they might say, oh yeah, it's fine, do whatever you want, or they might say, oh no, absolutely not, or they might want all of these complicated drawings about how is it going to look and all of that stuff. So if it's a temporary installation, which I guess it would be designed to be a temporary installation, i.e. you would clamp it onto the balcony with some kind of clamps which could easily be removed. Really, they can't say a lot because it is just temporary. Now that's something that I hadn't thought about, and I don't even know the answer. So let us know in the comments below if you know. Are you allowed to stick panels on the outside of your house if it's shared ownership, if it's a temporary installation? I guess this whole building, because it's a block of flats, the outside of the building technically is probably owned by some kind of management company as well, and there might be some kind of restrictions in place for things like that. He's not even allowed to install an EV charger because the cable would need to go on the outside of the building, and technically he doesn't own the outside of the building, so that does complicate things a little bit. Now in terms of orientation, we are west facing on this balcony, which means that you're going to get afternoon sun like we've got right now, which is quite nice, but it does mean that the sun's sort of most of the day is going to be there, so it's rising on that side of the building. So it's not ideal. A south facing wall would be a lot better because you'd get a lot longer generation throughout the day, but it's better than nothing. Afternoon sun, particularly in summer like this, when you get home the sun's still shining, you're potentially going to be able to use some of that solar energy when you get home, which could be quite good. But we've got to think about shading too. Let's have a look. So right now there's not a lot of shade, but when the sun's a bit lower in the sky, particularly in winter, you're actually going to get shade from those other buildings, I would imagine. So imagine in winter the sun's probably setting sort of over there somewhere. You might have shade from those buildings and potentially from this building nearby. But other than that, there's not a huge amount of shade. Now you do have plants on this balcony, and obviously those would have to go because they would shade the panels and pretty much ruin the generation. So again, it depends on how precious the customer is about their plants. We'll ask him later. But there's something else you need to think about. How do you know if the wiring in your house is safe to plug a solar system into or not? What if you've got an old rewirable fuse box or something similar? Is it safe to install plug-in solar then? So back at the consumer unit, there's an easy way to check whether your wiring is up to scratch or not, and that's whether you've got one of these. Normally you should have a label to say when it was last tested and inspected and when it's due to be tested and inspected next. In this case, our house was inspected when it was first built in 2023, and it should be inspected again 10 years from then in 2033. So in theory, this has all been tested and certified recently, and therefore we know that the wiring should be in good condition. If you don't have this, or you don't have any of the original paperwork, you should request what's called an EICR, or Electrical Installation Condition Report. That's where a qualified and competent electrician will come in and test all of the wiring in your house and give you a report to tell you basically whether your wiring is safe or not. And I would highly recommend getting one of those before you start messing around with plug-in solar. Well, this really is a lovely balcony, Graham. You were worried about it blocking out the light and the airflow, and to be honest, I think that's a valid concern.
If you put the panel up high, you've lost sitting out
block
here.
That view if you're sitting in the and if you're sitting in the living room and looking out the window, all of the view of the greenery is gone. You've just got a black solar panel that you're seeing. That answers that question, I guess. The other one you said about was heat, and that's an interesting one because obviously it's really hot and you can feel the heat just coming off the rails even of the balcony, which are not huge, so they're not absorbing that much heat. A solar panel, as we learnt earlier when we fitted one on my fence at home, gets extremely hot. So it might bring more heat into the building because it's absorbing a lot of that heat energy.
I think the only other place that we thought about was here. And sort of like have it as an upright panel, and it would get all the afternoon sun.
That's not a bad idea, actually. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think you're the ideal candidate for balcony solar. It might be doable with that one panel in the corner there. We can definitely see if we can find some mounting stuff for it, but like you say, if you don't want to ruin the aesthetics of your balcony and potentially have to ask permission and all of that stuff, then sticking normal solar panels on the balcony is probably not a good idea. But plug-in battery, no brainer in my opinion.
Yeah, I sort of expected that answer. Having looked at the system a little bit, I'm not really sure where the size balcony comes from to sustain a huge solar panel. It's certainly not for anyone that lives near here. I don't think it would work at all for
massive balconies in Germany or something.
Yeah. Oh, to be in Germany and not Britain, maybe we'd be better off there. Yeah, so I sort of expected that.
So just crunching the numbers now, you're spending about 60 quid a month on electricity. If you used battery only, you could get that down to maybe a third of what it currently is. So say that would save you about 500 quid a year. So it's not bad. But there is one limit that these systems have, which I don't think everyone realises, which is that they can only discharge 800 watts maximum into your house at any one time. So that means that if you turn the kettle on, for example, you're still going to be pulling the remainder of what you're pulling on top of that 800 watts is going to be pulled from the grid. It's not going to be able to fully cover the whole of that kettle because it's like a 3 kilowatt kettle. There is one workaround, which is that the battery banks often have a socket built into them that can discharge at full rate because it's sort of like an off-grid socket. So you could, for example, if you wanted to really rinse it, just plug your kettle into that.
Take the kettle out onto the balcony.
Yeah, but it might not be so practical.
I'm not sure that will float in this house, but we can try.
Now there's a final point that even I hadn't thought about, which is quite important, and that's back at the consumer unit, so let's take a look. So all of these plug-in solar systems, in order for them to know how much power you're using in the house and discharge enough power from the batteries to cover your house usage, they need some kind of meter, right? And that usually consists of a little device that plugs into a socket or something, and it's got a CT clamp that clamps around the main tail or feed cable into your house to measure how much power is coming into your house from the grid or how much is going out. Now the problem in a flat is that you don't have access to your meter tails because they're usually down in some kind of plant room, inaccessible. So this is a classic meter setup at a block of flats, you see. So we're actually on the second floor now and the flat is on the top floor. So there's no way you're getting a cable here or fit some kind of CT meter. There's no socket to plug it into or anything like that, which means the only way to fit a CT clamp in this setup would be to take the lid off the consumer unit and clamp around the main tail that goes into the main switch within the consumer unit. But obviously that's not a DIY job. Homeowners should not just be taking the cover off their consumer units because there's live parts that could be exposed that could be potentially dangerous. So you will need to get an electrician to install that meter, even if the rest of it is a so-called DIY job. So what was the big problem with plug-in solar? It wasn't the technology. It wasn't plugging it into a socket. The biggest problem is that many people are led to believe that plug-in solar will work at any property without even checking their electrics. And that's simply not the case. So if you're thinking of getting plug-in solar and you're not sure about the safety or suitability of your electrics, I highly recommend you get a qualified and well-reviewed electrician to come in and check your system. The fact is that a simple survey and a few electrical checks can make all the difference between a plug-in solar system that doesn't work and isn't safe, or a system that really does work well for you, is safe and saves you a load of money. So is your home suitable for plug-in or balcony solar? Let us know in the comments below what you found after following along with this video, and stay tuned for a potential future install coming soon.